There are many characters throughout the Bible who demonstrate great faith at various times, some even for a lifetime. Now, most are willing to perform a single great deed in the name of faith. You think about Naaman in 2 Kings chapter 5, who was willing to perform a great deed as a requirement of his healing, but yet he was unwilling to do something simple, something that was required of God for him to have this healing. We think of Gideon. He performed a single great deed as an act of faith. But friends, a saving faith is not a one-time act. It is a lifetime of obedience and love. Well, today as we consider faith, let's look briefly at a few Bible characters. First, we see Noah, a man who spent more than 100 years building the ark in anticipation of a flood caused by rain, something that mankind had never seen. Well, during all that time, he was also preaching, but he never converted a single person outside of his family unit. But yet, he remained faithful all of his life, saving 8 souls through his building of the ark. We think about Moses. Moses grew up with all the pleasures and the riches of being in the king's household, but he gave it up and hid for many years. Yet when he was sent to deliver the Israelites from Egyptian slavery, he began a mission that lasted for over 80 years. He remained faithful for all of those years with only a few periods of indiscretion, and his faith is one that was demonstrated many, many times over. We think of Joshua. Joshua served and observed Moses, consistently doing as directed because he considered Moses to be a faithful minister of God. When Moses passed from this life, Joshua became the leader of Israel, a task that he carried out for over 80 years. And we're amazed that he constantly consulted with God through prayer and then performed the tasks that were set before him by God. Friends, this is a faithful life. A faithful life well lived. Daniel was a faithful prophet during a very difficult period of time. He had a habit of praying in a specific place at a specific time. And when the king made a law prohibiting prayer to any god other than himself, Daniel didn't struggle to find an answer. He simply continued to be faithful in his prayers to God. Well, when faced with death, even then he remained faithful. And as his record reflects, he remained faithful to God all of his life. Joseph, as a boy, was unashamed to tell others what God had shown him. Sold by his brothers as a slave, landing in Potiphar's house, there he resisted the sinful advances of Potiphar's wife for his faith, and he was imprisoned. Still, he remained faithful, and he helped an innocent servant to be freed from prison. Then, forgotten for another 2 years, he remained in prison, but remained faithful to God. Joseph rose to prominence by delivering God's message to the Egyptians and remained faithful his entire life. And of course, we need to consider King David, a man who was described as being a man after God's own heart. Well, friends, this is the same David that killed the giant that every soldier feared. This was the same David who made mistakes in his life. This was the same David who committed adultery, who essentially committed murder. Here was a man who had many family problems, but yet, when he had those times that he succumbed to weakness, he repented. He came back to God, and he continued to remain faithful throughout his life. We think about Jesus. From his youth, he was faithfully going about his Father's business. As he began his ministry, he encountered many hardships, even not having a home. Yet he continued to follow his Father's instructions. He faced temptations by Satan, but he remained faithful to God. When he faced death, he didn't have to falter. He was willing to do his Father's will. Here was a man who lived a faithful life. Now, of course, he was God's son, but he lived as a man on earth, and he remained faithful all of his life so that we would have a perfect example to follow. Friends, we can look to these and many other great examples of faith to show us that faith is not a one-time big event, but it is a lifetime commitment. Friends, we thank you for joining us for our program today, and have a blessed day.